Hello and welcome to another Eurogamer Newscast, and this week we're talking about Microsoft and Sony squabbling over Activision Blizzard and throwing some accusations around in the public domain, which is interesting to see. My name's Tom Phillips, and joining me this week, as ever, is our trusty Eurogamer news reporting team. We've got Ed Nightingale.
Hello.
Victoria Kennedy.
Hello.
And Liv Nan.
Hello.
The big topic of discussion at the moment is the latest accusations, I suppose, from Microsoft, specifically regarding Game Pass and the suggestion from Microsoft that Sony is paying money to stop games coming into Game Pass because Sony apparently sees Game Pass as a big threat. Microsoft's subscription service is certainly popular, and I don't believe that Microsoft would be saying this if it didn't have evidence and believe that it was true. But this topic of exclusivity is nothing new to video games. Obviously, Microsoft and Sony have their own games that are exclusive and pay money for timed exclusivity for games from other companies. So is this just business as usual? We'll be discussing that and how this information came to be in the public domain as we talk over the week's news, and we'll talk a bit about Splatoon 3 as well, since yesterday we had a Nintendo Direct with plenty more information on that. But let's talk about Microsoft and Sony. This is obviously, it's been going on for a while. In the background of this is Activision Blizzard being bought by Microsoft for nearly $70 billion. That potential deal was announced at the beginning of this year and is due to be finalized before next summer. But in the meantime, we're in this sort of kind of limbo period where the deal itself is being scrutinized, and the question of whether it will run afoul of anti-competitive laws is certainly being discussed, and indeed this week it is. All of this comes from a Brazilian government filing. A lot of this stuff often happens behind closed doors, and I think the reason why people are so interested in all this is because it is happening in front of everybody in the public. And what Brazil does is publish these sort of details of anti-competitive investigations that it is doing. And of course, Activision Blizzard, Microsoft and Sony, they all do business in Brazil. So this is just as relevant to Brazil as the UK or the US or anywhere else in the world. And yeah, last night, the news came out that Microsoft had responded to something that Sony had said previously, and that they were saying that Sony specifically was paying blocking money to games or to game makers so that their games did not end up on Xbox Game Pass. Ed, we were talking about this a bit earlier. I don't think you were that surprised by this, right? Do you think that this is sort of business as usual?
Yeah, I think this whole thing, in some ways, I sort of just roll my eyes at it because, like, this happens all the time in businesses, surely, behind closed doors. What's interesting is that this is being aired publicly. Thank you, Brazil. So I think it would be naive to think that this sort of dealing and competitiveness, wasn't happening. It's, in a way, feels a bit like Sony and Microsoft throwing their toys out the pram, trying to sort of one-up each other, having a bit of a playground squabble over Call of Duty. I think, in that sense, this is business as usual in terms of competitiveness. Of course, every company wants to have their exclusives. They want to have a unique selling point. Every developer has that. Every publisher has that. Every platform holder has that. They want to get customers. So, of course, they're going to want exclusives to bring in customers. That's just business. I think what is interesting is this whole Game Pass blocking thing, which does feel a little bit shady on Sony's part. I'm sort of not surprised about it. It feels a bit shady in a kind of underhand tactics kind of way, as opposed to a positive, we are going to create exclusives to attract people. This is a more negative, we're going to stop our competitors, which feels a little bit shady. I think it also shows how threatened Sony must be for Game Pass if they are actively trying to block it. They've obviously just come up with their own subscription service in PS Plus, but they're doing things a little bit differently in that it doesn't have those day one games. The fact that Xbox is doing that, but they don't have many good exclusives, means that maybe Sony is a little bit threatened by that. So it's quite underhand what they're doing. I'm sort of not surprised by it, but it does. Those comments feel a little bit shady, I will admit.
And it's worth saying as well that while this is business as usual, exclusives happen all the time. This particular deal that Brazil and everyone else in the world is examining is not business as usual. It is going to be a seismic change when this happens. And I think a lot of what these companies, Microsoft and Sony, are arguing about is how much of a change it's going to be. And Microsoft, for its part, is saying, well, yeah, we're going to buy Activision Blizzard. We're going to pay $70 billion. But actually, it's not going to change that much. And we saw that previously with sort of the squabbling over whether Call of Duty was an essential game or not. Victoria, sort of looking back at all of that, are you surprised that Microsoft had to sort of take the stance that Call of Duty was not an essential game, whereas Sony was saying that it was, and that it was something that people bought consoles for? What's your thinking on all that?
My thoughts on this is still, if we go way, way back to when this deal was first announced, I still remember thinking that while Activision and like Call of Duty was kind of like at the front and center of what everyone was thinking, I still think that their big like deal in that is the King, the mobile side of things. And so maybe Microsoft, is being quite legitimate when they're saying it's not the essential game. Like maybe that is not what they had at the forefront of their minds when they made this deal. I mean, obviously, Call of Duty is a huge brand, essentially, in its own right. Like, even people who don't play games have heard of Call of Duty. So I don't think it's not an essential game, or whatever the exact wording was. But I do think that there are other things at play that aren't necessarily coming to the fore as much as this particular franchise is at the moment.
That mobile, I think, is an absolutely critical point and something that has not been discussed. I've seen this week, when we're talking about all of this. King is such an important part of that deal because Microsoft has never itself really cracked mobile, has it?
Yes, I mean, I still think that maybe Microsoft is. I mean, because people are like, oh, I can't believe that Microsoft is saying that potentially one of these biggest games is not essential, blah, blah, blah. But I still feel that Microsoft obviously have a bigger agenda than just that one franchise. And so, yeah, maybe they are right. It's not as essential in their big long-term plans.
It is just quite amusing and ironic watching Microsoft downplaying one of the biggest games in the world.
Oh, no, I fully understand like that amusing side of it. And, it does obviously make the headlines because it's more headline worthy, I suppose. But I just think there's a lot more going on. While this is all effectively being aired like dirty laundry in front of us, there's still going to be other things that we aren't necessarily being told about right now. So I just think that's something to bear in mind while we're discussing all this.
Absolutely right. Liv, did you follow the whole Call of Duty is essential, Call of Duty is not essential debate? There were headlines which ran with those. And I think it's worth remembering when we're talking about all of this, this is language not for video game fans. It's for the business community. And Microsoft has said, right, that actually Call of Duty is not going to go away from PlayStation. They're going to keep it on there for the moment. So is Microsoft right, do you think then, Liv, that Call of Duty, it's sort of irrelevant to this whole question of whether the Activision acquisition is going to be anti-competitive?
Honestly, I think it depends on what sort of angle you mean by like it's an essential thing. Like, I mean, Victoria mentioned a really good point that maybe, in financial terms, maybe what they mean is that it's really a tiny small amount of their revenue compared to like the mobile side. But in terms of its dominance and its recognition within the gaming world, it is a pretty big deal. So I think it's difficult to just say yes, they're right or they're wrong, I think.
Yeah, is this financial terms or is it brand power?
Yeah.
and those two
Yeah.
kind of are linked anyway in a weird way. So
even the brand power side of things, I mean, I know we've all discussed this previously, but obviously Vanguard flopped compared to other Call of Duty things, and so it's not like they have. I don't get me wrong. I know that Call of Duty has done remarkably well since its conception 20 years ago. I can't even remember when the first one came out. Anyway, long time ago. But it's not been like, we're not going to get that yearly release anymore. They've already said, so I've got a fly buzzing around me. We're not going to get that yearly release anymore. Vanguard, they are going to have to do something, I think. Obviously, we've got Modern Warfare 2 coming up this year. Then we're having a break next year. So they're going to have to, do something to kind of bring the brand back, I think, to what it was anyway.
Yeah, I think Call of Duty is in an interesting place right now. It does have the mobile game, it does have Warzone 2 launching. So this, I certainly don't think we've seen the end of Call of Duty, and the Vanguard is going to be like the last the last we see of it. But yeah, I do think that there is a lot more to this conversation than just Call of Duty. And yeah, they've said Call of Duty will continue on PlayStation for the time being. It was interesting, seeing the conversations from Sony about it being like a PlayStation system seller, and Microsoft was going to take that away, and Microsoft saying, we're not taking it away. It's sort of irrelevant to all of this.
This conversation has made me more curious, though, about the games that they are talking about PlayStation blocking, though, because I want to know more about what those are. Because obviously we've agreed that things like The Last of Us will not be going to Xbox, and despite Kratos' little debut last week, it's not going to officially come to Xbox. And so I want to know more about the games that are being blocked from this Game Pass release.
Well, we were talking about Stray earlier, weren't we? Where, I should say we have no knowledge of whether this is one of those games, but I think it's the type of game where it's not made by PlayStation, and you're right, like, we're never going to get God of War on Game Pass unless it's that weird game made by someone in South London. And it's the studios that Sony works closely with, that maybe it is already, it has a marketing deal or some sort of exclusivity of a release deal, that I would imagine they're also saying, hey, here's some more money if you don't go on Game Pass at all. Or they make it part of their contractual obligations, like, oh, you want our promotion, you want to be in the next PlayStation State of Play, we'll give you all of that visibility, but we'll also put a line in the contract that says no Game Pass for 18 months or whatever. I mean, we're just speculating here, but if I was sort of asked what games do you think this refers to, I would say it's that kind of level of stuff where, Stray is a third party game, but there's absolutely no sign of it coming to Xbox anytime soon. It feels like a Sony game, doesn't it? Like the way it's been promoted over time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, while Sony and Microsoft are squabbling about this, is this somewhere where indie games can kind of rise up a little bit and get something out of this? I mean, obviously they are independent by name, but if they are being offered escalating amounts of money for exclusivity, then indie games can actually get something decent out of this. And that also shows the power of and the importance of indie games to the subscription services. If Microsoft and Sony don't have these first party games, well, either don't want to put them on or don't have them, then it falls on third parties and indie games to really fill that gap. And it shows the importance of those games. And if they're willing to pay a lot of money to have them exclusively, indies can do pretty well out of that, I would have thought.
Yeah,
Playing devil's advocate. Sorry,
after you.
I was just going to say, playing devil's advocate though, there's no reason why indie games can't get that same level of visibility, get put in a state of play, and still be able to launch on other things at the same time. It's the platform holders that are making that judgment call, that say, well, if you want to be alongside God of War next to us, this is the consequence. This is the thing that you've got to do. You just can't go on Game Pass for whatever reason. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I play a lot more indie games that I wouldn't necessarily play because they're on a service, though. So, as much as I appreciate what you're saying that indie games could easily get the visibility if they wanted, there are still a few that I probably wouldn't play unless it was on a service. It's probably a loss on me because I've played some great games that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of buying, like Tunic, for example. I love that game, but I wouldn't have played it if it wasn't on Game Pass.
Power wash. I wouldn't have bought it. It's like 20 quid, 20, 30 quid.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have paid that. What other games do you think that, this Sony might be looking at for this kind of thing? Because I think of sort of Square Enix, and the closeness that it has with that publisher outside of the AAA space. It's a possibility. They've had what's interesting is that Call of Duty currently has a PlayStation brand deal attached. I don't think there's any suggestion that Call of Duty wants to go on Game Pass. I think it's quite happy being a big box game, but I don't know.
Well, thinking of that, there are, but also are there games that are now on PS Plus that it's launched that were on Game Pass and aren't any longer. So, for instance, I've been playing Final Fantasy 12 recently on PS Plus, which was on Game Pass and was taken off. So, you mentioned Square Enix there. Like, are there games that used to be on Game Pass and now Sony have said, you know what, we want that on ours instead, and have taken that? Is that another example of this?
It's that the thing that you've seen with TV series on streaming services where like you're watching something on Netflix and then it disappears, and then a few months later you're like, oh, that's because it went onto Amazon or somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what I've been playing on Game Pass. I was playing Final Fantasy 8 on Game Pass, and that's not there anymore. I wonder if that's on PlayStation.
That is on PlayStation.
Is it on PlayStation?
PlayStation has all the Final Fantasies.
I'll have to sort of... Although I won't be able to transfer my save from Xbox, will I?
Nope.
No.
You have to start again.
Do I want to do all that again? But that's a conversation for another time. So
Yeah.
Another
Also-
angle to this. Sorry.
So,
Go on
well, just also is Sony are squabbling about Call of Duty, and of course they're going to moan about that because of course they're going to be the only company to put up a fight against Microsoft. It's their biggest competitor, so of course they're gonna kick up a fuss. But maybe instead of squabbling over Call of Duty, they should think, well, what can we do to compete with that? They've just bought all these other studios. They've just bought Bungie. Why don't they put some money into Destiny 2 and make Destiny 2 a rival to Call of Duty? Or what about all these other live service games that they've got coming up? Will they compete with Call of Duty? Rather than moaning about that, why they actually make a competitor?
focus on what you can control.
Yeah, it's a very because like Sony seemed to be quite happy with its own business model of releasing blockbusters. That's what it wants to do, and that is where it has a real edge over Microsoft. Microsoft has an edge over Sony when it comes to the subscription service, but you can see that, especially when it comes to these huge, Sony couldn't do like a $70 billion deal to buy Activision Blizzard. I really don't think that it would do that. I think that you're seeing like legitimate, like we really should try and stop this concern from Sony. I personally don't think that it's going to be successful, but they're certainly trying. They're lodging their disagreement with it. The other angle I was going to say is that Microsoft, as again part of this Brazilian government filing last night, said it would simply not be profitable to make Call of Duty an Xbox exclusive, which is interesting. Even even though it can soak up this sort of $70 billion deal, it's still looking at the end of it. It's not just about taking a game away from Sony. It's about like we're not going to buy a company and not expect it to make billions for us. They want something like the Minecraft model, where at the time $2 billion for Minecraft seemed like an extremely ridiculous amount of money, and yet they made it back in about a month because Minecraft just prints money and continues to do so via the sale of in-game items, and I think that's what they want to do with Call of Duty and King, as you mentioned, Victoria.
Yeah,
I still love that while all this is going on, Nintendo, I think, is acing it this year. I know you guys discussed this in the newscast a while ago, but Nintendo is just cracking on, doing its own thing and releasing some great stuff. And we've got a good slate from Nintendo coming up while Sony and Microsoft squabble.
Well, that's the thing. There are so many exclusives on Nintendo, and they're not moaning about that. It's just It's
Well,
just Sony, Microsoft
to be fair,
moaning at each other.
Nintendo's not buying Activision Blizzard, a company which
Well,
makes
it's not.
Sony millions and millions of dollars in game revenue and
Do you think
advertising
if
partnerships.
Nintendo did, in some other universe, did do this, though, do you think that they would be getting the same sort of stroppy throwing the toys out of the pram reaction from other... Or do you
I
think
think it
this is
depends
just
who it was. If
Microsoft
Nintendo
Sony
turned around and
thing?
said, we're buying Square Enix, then I think Sony would massively kick off.
It doesn't matter who it is. It's not personal. It is just business. I feel like we're all sort of agreeing that this is basically what it is. That we're not seeing anything sort of too out of the ordinary here.
It's also nice, I suppose, that you have seen people like Phil Spencer and Jim Ryan, and they have been championing each other's games. Like, I can't remember who it was, but someone said they were looking forward to playing God of War. It must have been Jim Ryan.
Phil Spencer.
Phil Spencer. Yeah, I got them the wrong way around. Anyway, you know, he was... Yeah, anyway, like the Xbox One is looking forward to playing the PlayStation 1.
Yeah, that's the cuddly PR. Like, we'll get some likes on Twitter stuff, and then behind the scenes, it's business. You know, like at the end of the day, your time and your money will either be given to one gaming company or another if you like video games, and games companies want to be the one that your time and money is going to.
Have you bought a console because of a game?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was it? Ed,
A Switch for Breath of the Wild. I will buy anything that Zelda is on. So
That's the exact same for me.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and me three. That was definitely a straightaway purchase when I got a Switch.
Liv, you have a Switch already, but what did you think of Splatoon 3 this week?
It looked fun. I don't play Splatoon, but it looked very fun. It looked like there was a lot of stuff for people to enjoy, returning things and new content, and everyone is really enjoying Deep Cut as well.
Can you explain if Big Man, yeah. If people maybe did not catch this week's Nintendo Direct, entirely dedicated to Splatoon, can you briefly explain what Deep Cut is?
So Deep Cut is every game has like a set of idol announcers. So I think there was Kali and Mari, because calamari, and this time we've got a group called Deep Cut with a big Ray called Big Man, who is turning into the internet's favorite. I think, move over Fido.
God, Fido. I've already forgotten.
every week there's a new Nintendo mascot.
Fido, what's that?
So good. And there's three of them this time around, which relates to the fact that you can now have 3 team battles. Is that right?
Yeah,
Ish.
isn't it? Ish. Well, it's 4v2v2, isn't it?
So yeah, but that's specifically in the Splatfests. I guess you need me to explain what a Splatfest is now, Tom, don't you?
I voted in ketchup versus mustard or mayonnaise.
Is this the rock, paper, scissors thing?
Yeah.
And now there are 3 options, right, Ed?
Yeah, exactly. So the Splatfest is just a way of getting the internet to battle each other. You pick a side depending on what thing it is, whether it's ketchup and mayonnaise or whatever else. It's always very silly. And they're now making that 3-way instead of 2-way, which then means that those Splatfest battles will start off as 2 teams, and then it becomes 3 teams halfway through the battle, but becomes 4v2v2 to make it more balanced. But it's going to be pretty chaotic, I think.
Oh, we didn't need Splatfest to make the internet fight.
They could do a Microsoft or Sony who deserves to own Activision.
Who gets custody of Activision?
Yeah.
I love the idea that they go and they go to Nintendo to fight it out over Ink Wars.
What's the
think
third
the
option, though? Is it Nintendo, or is it just they remain exclusive, or what?
The third option is world peace. Do you think the ink would be yellow because it would be custody?
Oh.
Very good. Well done,
Awful.
Mr. Phillips.
Awful.
Yeah.
As someone who
Carry on.
has never played a Splatoon game, my introductions to Splatoon is Inkling Girl and Mario Kart, and I was like, who on earth is that? And then obviously I spoke to you guys, and Martin got very excited about Splatoon yesterday. As someone who's never played the game, why should I?
It's a really well-designed Nintendo level of quality, polished, team-based shooter that has fun gameplay mechanics and is colourful and happy and doesn't take itself too seriously.
It's also good for a wide range of players because you win not by shooting other people, but by how much of the arena you cover with your team's ink. So you can actually hang back and just like ink all the walls and ink all the floors, and you don't need to have exact aim to do that, and you can still contribute to the team. Whereas some people will go straight in and just start shooting the other players to stop them from inking as much. But it needs to have a mix of both. So it is good for all sort of levels of players. What I will say, and I'm pretty sure I saw someone talking about this or a meme about this a few years ago, but you've got like Call of Duty, which is basically a very adult, very mature game that is generally played by teenagers trying to be cool. And then you've got Splatoon, which is seemingly for children because it's bright and colourful and cartoony, but it's full of very, very competitive adults who are very good at that game.
Like
so they are kind of opposed to one another.
Okay, interesting. I did think it looked a lot of fun. It's the kind of game I can imagine playing with like my kids, just to like pass some time on a rainy afternoon or something.
Yeah, matches are like 2 minutes, so you can whip through loads of matches very quickly, which becomes very addictive. But I did think, I mean, you mentioned all this. I did think it was interesting in the direct that they literally went back to basics and spent a long time explaining the basics of what the game is about. Very much for a new audience, like they're trying to reintroduce the series. But then there were some nuggets of new bits, which are essentially just building on the existing game. So there's nothing that's like hugely new, but there's enough new stuff in there to warrant existing players wanting to play this new one. But there's also a lot in there to attract new players as well. So I feel like this is very much reintroducing Splatoon to the entire Switch audience.
That card game was pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's like Splatoon meets Tetris.
Yeah. I think there's enough in there for people who've played already. But also, yeah, it could be your first entry into the Splatoon series, and maybe it will be, Victoria.
Maybe. Is there? I did see they briefly mentioned a story mode. I take it that's not really why people would play it. It's played for like the online chaos.
The first game I think was multiplayer only, and then in the second game they added in a single player, it's kind of like test rooms. So it's almost like teaching. Well, it's essentially a training mode that it's teaching you the mechanics by going through sort of test rooms to show you how the different weapons work and the different abilities, and to sort of push the boundaries of what you can do in the game, almost like puzzles in a way. So I think they're expanding on that.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll get that demo.
Yeah, that's worth shouting. Free demo coming later this month alongside 7 days of free Nintendo Switch Online. So download it, get your free 7 days of Nintendo Switch Online. Try Splatoon. If you don't like it, go play Mario Kart.
Nope, then play Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
Yes. I like yesterday there was a tweet from the official Power Wash Simulator account saying opposite Power Wash Simulator game looks good.
I was going to say, is this why you like Splatoon or why you like Power Wash? Because it had that like...
Well, yeah, it does have that same kind of... When you're covering a level with stuff, like you do sort of get... I can sometimes forget that there is a battle going on over there because I'm just like, just painting this wall purple.
Did you write your name? Little smiley face. TP was here.
It's been a while since I played, but I think it's not like fine enough that you could actually write things, and I think that is for obvious child safety reasons.
Yes.
Fair enough. Say no more.
There's also lots of different weapons that splat in different ways. So there's a paintbrush, or there's a big roller, or there are guns, and they all sort of splat the walls in different sort of ways and shapes and things. So it would be very hard to actually write with it.
Splatana. I take it that's a new thing for this game.
Yeah.
Cool.
And also it has big man in it. So why wouldn't you want to play?
I think he wears Ray-Bans.
And Nails. Let's not forget Nails, the little sea snail.
He
Nails
looked
is
like
cool.
such a dude with all sunglasses just in the corner. And I also really appreciated, I don't know if these, again, I've never played Splatoon before, so it might be a recurring thing, but I like the sort of man of wardrobe sort of puns and things that they had going on. That spoke to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Right, well, that is another eclectic week in the world of video games. Thank you if you have made it with us this far, and thank you to all of you guys for joining. Let's wrap up there and see what next week has to bring. Until then, Ed, where can people find you on Twitter?
You can find me at ed_knights with an N.
Victoria?
I'm a little chop shop gal.
And Liv?
I am at Just Cast Holy.
And I'm at Tom Phillips EG. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.
See you next week.
Bye bye.